After Queen Elizabeth I passed away, her closest advisors began searching through the Queen's personal belongings, and they found a letter. Upon closer inspection, the contents of the letter sent chills down their spines. What was in that letter that had such shocking power? Did it have anything to do with her sudden death? Or perhaps, did it reveal a truth far more terrifying? Let's go back to the beginning. Elizabeth was born in 1533. This was a tumultuous time and, arguably, the biggest scandal of the era. Her mother was Anne Boleyn, the woman said to have enchanted King Henry VIII and sparked his earth-shattering divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. This very scandal was what kicked off the English Reformation. And that was just the beginning. Not many people in this world can say that their own father ordered the execution of their mother, but that's exactly what happened to poor Elizabeth. Anne Boleyn fell out of King Henry's favour. He, the king obsessed with having a male heir to secure the throne after his death, ordered the execution of his queen by beheading on May 19th, 1536. At the time, Elizabeth was just over 2 years old. Just 11 days after Anne Boleyn walked to the scaffold, Henry had a new queen. That was Jane Seymour, who moved into the palace. And just a year after marrying Henry VIII, Jane gave Elizabeth a baby brother, Edward. This boy was no ordinary brother, he was the male heir that Henry VIII had killed for. Growing up in a turbulent court and witnessing horrifying events from a very young age, Elizabeth faced many pressures. One of the greatest pressures, especially once she became queen, was maintaining the image of a strong monarch while adhering to the era's harsh beauty standards. In the 16th century, the ideal beauty for the English aristocracy, particularly women, was envisioned as snow-white skin. The skin had to be porcelain white, smooth, symbolizing nobility, elegance and earthly perfection. But life dealt a fatal blow to Elizabeth and her appearance in 1562. She contracted smallpox. This terrible disease left severe consequences. Her skin was left severely pockmarked, and she was even rendered nearly bald. For a queen whose image played a vital role in maintaining power and the adoration of her subjects, this was a tragedy. To cover her scarred skin and to try to look younger as she aged, Elizabeth had to use extremely thick layers of makeup. But these very attempts at concealment, although aimed at maintaining her image, may have contributed to the deterioration of her health and led to her death. Queen Elizabeth I's signature makeup was what helped her create that ghostly image with her legendary porcelain white skin. She used a cosmetic called Venetian ceruse. It sounds fancy, but its main ingredients were white lead and vinegar. Using this cosmetic was quite simple. Apply a thick layer to the face and neck. It had incredible covering power, turning scarred skin into a strange porcelain white canvas. However, it could also have an unpleasant smell like sour wine. But the danger didn't stop at white lead. Elizabeth also used products containing mercury. There are records suggesting she applied mercury to her lips. And it's highly likely that she also used a makeup remover containing mercury, something that could actually corrode her flesh. Based on modern scientific knowledge, the harmful effects of lead and mercury are extremely serious. They are heavy metals with high toxicity, causing serious and often irreversible health problems. Long-term exposure to lead can lead to hair loss, skin deterioration, and at worst, death from lead poisoning. Mercury also causes similar damage, affecting the nervous system and internal organs. Queen Elizabeth used these toxic cosmetics for decades. As she aged, to maintain a youthful appearance, she might have used them in increasing amounts. This undoubtedly contributed significantly to her declining health. After a long period of lead and mercury accumulation in her body, Elizabeth's body may have become literally toxic. Could her very beauty secret have been the thing silently killing her every day? Of course, the use of toxic cosmetics is just one potential cause of the Queen's death. Other sources also mention other possibilities, such as cancer or pneumonia, common and dangerous diseases at the time. Elizabeth's health began to decline noticeably in the autumn of 1602. She became frail and tended to keep to herself more. She fell into a state of deep melancholy. Part of this sadness undoubtedly came from witnessing the passing of her dear friends around her, especially after the death of Catherine Carey in February 1603. And there was another name that haunted her until the end: Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex. Essex, whom she had once deeply loved and later ordered executed for treason. A courtier recorded in 1602 that the Queen delighted to sit in the dark, and sometimes with shedding tears to bewail Essex. The pain of losing her lover and the torment over her own decision undoubtedly severely affected her mental and physical health. In her final months, Elizabeth refused to let doctors examine her. Perhaps she didn't want to face the truth about her health, or simply her pride and independence wouldn't allow her to show weakness. A shocking detail about her final days is that she refused to lie down. She believed that if she lay down, she would never get up again. This strange belief caused her to stand for 15 continuous hours, while her ladies-in-waiting had to arrange pillows around her in case she collapsed at any moment. Finally, on March 24, 1603, Queen Elizabeth I passed away at Richmond Palace, aged 69. A glorious reign came to an end, but to fully understand the Virgin Queen and why she lived such a solitary life, we need to look back at her tumultuous love life. Queen Elizabeth I is known throughout the world by the title the Virgin Queen. She refused all marriage proposals from European princes and nobles, declaring that she was married to England and that only England was her true love. However, her personal life was much more complicated than that title suggests. In reality, in her youth, Elizabeth possessed a beautiful face, a graceful figure, and she knew very well how to dress and apply makeup, making her the center of attention at every ball. Her beauty and charm made dozens of men captivated and ready to kneel at her feet. Among them were powerful figures such as King Philip II of Spain and King Eric of Sweden. And Queen Elizabeth I showed no indifference to this pursuit. The history of her love life shows that the men who passed through her life were not few at all. The first prominent person on this list is Robert Dudley, her childhood friend from infancy. Right in the first months after she ascended the throne, people rumored that the Queen had a relationship with Dudley. What's notable is that Dudley was already married at the time, but the relationship between him and the Queen was so public that everyone knew. The Queen favoured him exceptionally, granted him the title of Earl, and allowed him to enter her bedchamber at will, regardless of the time. In 1560, Robert Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart, died mysteriously from a fatal fall down a staircase. This incident sparked gruesome rumours that the Queen and her lover were involved in this death. Nevertheless, Elizabeth and Dudley continued their close relationship for many years after that. However, the Queen never once mentioned marrying him. Although she had many other suitors later, some believe that Robert Dudley remained Elizabeth's first and only love. After Dudley remarried in 1578, Elizabeth also opened her heart to another man in 1579. That was Francois, Duke of Anjou, the brother of King Henri III of France. He was introduced to the English court for the Queen to consider a marriage. However, this relationship seemed quite unequal. Anjou was a young man around 20 years old, while Elizabeth was much older. He had a small stature and a pockmarked face, perhaps from smallpox, and there were also rumours about his unusual tastes. Yet Queen Elizabeth seemed to have genuine affection and interest in Francois. She even named her pet frog after him. However, this potential marriage faced fierce opposition from the English public. After a few weeks, Anjou returned to France. He returned to England in October 1581, to the Queen's delight. She took a surprising step. She announced she would marry him. She even publicly exchanged rings and showed affection before the entire court. But after just one night, she herself broke off that engagement. This failed matchmaking seemed to have caused the English court to almost lose all hope that the Queen would marry and have children. She still had a few other relationships, but none of them reached the status of a husband. They only remained at the level of lovers and were granted titles. The last well-known love affair in the Queen's life was with Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex. He was the son of the stepdaughter of Robert Dudley, her first lover. This relationship was notable due to the large age gap. Essex was only 22 when their improper relationship began in 1589, while Elizabeth was 56 at the time. The young Earl was handsome, quick-witted, and seemed completely devoted to the Queen. The true nature of their relationship remains a secret. Elizabeth flew into a rage when she heard that Essex married the young Francis Walsingham in 1590. Essex tried to appease her by writing poems praising the Queen's beauty. From 1591, the Queen began involving her favourite in state affairs, entrusting him with military responsibilities. Elizabeth's mixing of personal and political matters in this way greatly displeased her advisers. With childlike arrogance, Essex enjoyed the Queen's favour and exploited her capricious behaviour, a mix of jealousy, passion, and generosity. He became increasingly arrogant and presumptuous in his behaviour. It climaxed in 1597 when, upon being appointed Master of the Ordnance, he behaved so arrogantly that the Queen slapped him and shouted, "Go and be hanged." But even so, she seemed unable to break free from his charm. However, Essex's military capabilities were quite poor. In 1598, he was appointed Lord Lieutenant of Ireland and sent to quell the rebellion. Leading 16,000 soldiers, he suffered repeated defeats against the poorly equipped rebel forces. On September 6, 1599, Essex was forced to sign a truce with the Earl of Tyrone, an act considered a humiliating defeat for England. Essex's final reckless actions led to a tragic outcome. On the morning of September 28, 1599, at just 10 o'clock, Essex burst into the palace wearing his dirty riding boots. He strode purposefully through the rooms, pushing past bewildered servants to burst straight into the Queen's bedchamber. There, he saw Queen Elizabeth, who had just woken up, in a state no male subject had ever been allowed to see before, without makeup, without jewelry. Simply a frail 66-year-old woman. Elizabeth drove Essex out and had him imprisoned. He was brought to trial for his failures in Ireland and stripped of all his offices on June 3, 1600, but was later released. However, Essex abused the Queen's leniency. In February 1601, he took another insane step. Along with some adventurers, Essex planned to seize the Tower and castles, demanding that the Queen appoint him Protector of England. But the rebellion failed, and this time Queen Elizabeth had run out of patience with this reckless lover. On February 24, 1601, Essex was sentenced to death for treason. Queen Elizabeth declared a statement that went down in history. "All that he has done against myself I can pardon, but I cannot pardon anyone who attempts to harm England." She did not hesitate to immediately sign the death warrant. The next day, February 25, 1601, Essex was beheaded right in front of the palace. Looking back at Elizabeth's life, the big question remains, why did the Queen absolutely refuse to marry? Although many men were captivated by her and she was not indifferent to them, she chose a solitary life until the very end. The reason for this remains an unanswered mystery. When Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, she had no direct heir. This was the end of the Tudor line, the dynasty that had ruled England for over a century of upheaval. The successor to the throne was King James VI of Scotland. He became King James I of England, a significant historical event that united the two kingdoms under one crown. Elizabeth's 45-year reign is often called the Golden Age. This was a period when England achieved many brilliant accomplishments in culture, arts, the time of Shakespeare, and naval power, defeating the Spanish Armada. And there's a thought-provoking perspective. Queen Elizabeth built an incredibly successful reign, bringing the stability and prosperity that King Henry VIII had longed for. Many believe that this illustrious reign, this great queen, was the greatest legacy of her mother, Anne Boleyn. Henry VIII tried to erase Anne from history, but her own daughter became one of the greatest monarchs England ever had. Elizabeth built her success upon her mother's sacrifice. Now let's go back to the moment the Queen died and her advisors found that mysterious letter. The contents of the letter sent chills down their spines. Could that letter be a confession about the personal secrets she kept hidden throughout her life? Or was it a final testament about the fate of England? Or perhaps, did it reveal the horrifying truth about how those toxic cosmetics had destroyed her from within? Another possibility, and perhaps what made the advisors shudder the most, is that the letter was related to the successor. Elizabeth had refused to publicly name a successor. Did that letter contain the name of the person who would sit on the throne, or some secret about the succession that they were unaware of? What do you think really happened? What secret did that letter hold? Leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next strange and fascinating history stories. See you next time.